The religious writer David Dark wrote, "Religion is born out of questions, not answers." Before I read his book, I had already come to this conclusion based on my own educational experiences. Most notably, my father having given me a library card and a set of encyclopedias and encouraging me to seek out and to be curious. As I began my faith journey, I had some more questions that began to pop up that I didn't really understand until I heard them expressed by Andrew Lloyd Webber. See if any of these thoughts resonate with you. Every time I look at you, I don't understand why you let the things you did get so out of hand. You'd have managed better if you had it planned. Why'd you choose such a backwood town in such a strange land? If you'd come today, you would have reached a whole nation. Israel in 4 BC had no mass communication. And then he goes on from there in the next verse to say, tell me what you think about your friends at the top. Who you think besides yourselves the pick of the crop. Buddha, was he where it's at? Is he where you are? Could Muhammad move a mountain, or was that just PR? Did you mean to die like that? Is that a mistake? Did you know your messy death would be a record breaker? Now the music, for those of you that don't recognize it, is from the musical Jesus Christ Superstar. It's a musical written in 1969, but one whose questions still resonate with us today. And I think the questions in that first verse are most relevant to our series and what we're doing here. The heart of those questions in that first verse asks a very simple question. Why then? Why in the Jewish year 3758? Why in a backwater province of the greatest empire the world had ever seen to that point? Why step on the stage in that time at that place? As I look back over the words to the song Superstar, I think about especially those last few lines. Why'd you choose such a backward time in such a strange land? If you'd come today, you would have ruled the whole nation. Israel in 4 BC had no mass communication. Ever wonder what would happen if Jesus had Twitter? Or Instagram? You see Jesus holding a phone up like this in front of the church, clicking pictures, It's the question that I think is valid. Why choose that time? Why choose that place? I think the adage, timing is everything, has a lot to do with that. For most major movements, whether they are within religion or within culture, they happen as a matter of the right people bringing the right message at the right time to the right people. With that in mind, we're going to look at, or try to look at least some of the catalysts for Jesus' ministry to have had the kind of effect on the world that it did. How it led to the eventual founding of the faith that we practice today. What created that perfect societal storm for the life, ministry, death, and resurrection of Jesus to alter the trajectory of world history? Well, the world that Jesus was born into was a world that revolved around ideas and systems of honor, patronage, kinship, and purity. Now, honor is the respect that is given to an individual by their cultural group based on being the right kind of person and doing the right kinds of things. This is the opposite of shame, which is either a loss of respect based on one's actions and character, or the corrective means used to restore someone's honor after it's been lost. Another way of saying this is that honor is basically a claim to worth that's socially acknowledged. It's something that you have, but it's not necessarily something that you can give to yourself. It's something that other people give to you. It's something that other people acknowledge in you. For those who lived in the days that Jesus lived, honor was easily lost in the droning of public opinion if one did not keep their reputation up. A person had to maintain the correct character and behavior, or at least have the correct appearance of character and the facade of proper actions, if the person wished to maintain or to aspire to a certain social standing. There are reports, historical documents that talk about how during the time of the Roman rulers, in particular Marcus Aurelius, would pay people to run through the streets of Rome, screaming at the top of their lungs about how great Marcus Aurelius was. Now, it seems kind of silly to us, but that sort of PR, if you will, was the kind of thing that swayed public opinion very easily. As we pointed out, they didn't have Twitter with the constant news feed from Fox News or CNN or Reuters or AP to tell you whether or not the story was true. You just had a whole bunch of people going through the streets saying, Marcus Aurelius is a great ruler. Marcus Aurelius is a great guy. Marcus Aurelius does great things for Rome. Who were you to doubt? Word of mouth had great power back then. But it wasn't the only thing that enhanced the way people viewed others. It wasn't the only thing that swayed people's opinion. Patronage was another of these things. It's a relationship between two parties. One who has something privileged to offer to the other, like goods, services, or social standing. Patronage provides someone with something they can't get for themselves, but it calls them to respond in generosity with gifts or services in return. The person that receives the gift is called a client, and they become indebted to the person who is providing what they cannot get, and they must respond according to the patron's wishes. The New Testament recognizes this as part of the culture and alters it in the gospel by changing reciprocity to grace. God has indebted all living beings by virtue of being the creator and sustainer of life. The story of Jesus and Levi, or Matthew, provides an example of this Christian expression of patronage. Jesus, a learned and respected rabbi, invites Levi, a Jew and a traitorous tax collector for the Roman government, to become one of his followers. Levi gets an immediate change in social standing. Someone who was previously dishonored and impure by Jewish standards because of his affiliation with Rome can put that aside and now begin to follow a learned rabbi. In return for this act of generosity that Jesus has offered him, Levi has a feast in Jesus' honor and invites all of his friends and all of his associates to come and celebrate the change in his life. Jesus demands nothing, but Levi reacts with grace and mercy, to grace and mercy with gratitude and contrition. In this case, the patronage becomes life-changing. Now, it didn't completely do away with Levi's past, because if you continue reading that story in Matthew 9, what you'll find is that the Pharisees and others who were against Jesus pointed out the fact that Jesus is eating with publicans, that's another word for a tax collector, and sinners. So while Levi was able to change, it's a slow change, but it was a change. Patronage was a part of life for them. Now, a common expression in the genteel South that is not as innocuous as it sounds is, "Who are your people?" You ever heard anybody say that? Probably on a really old movie that was depicting antebellum culture. But the truth is, people still ask this question in modern ways, but they still ask the question. It's a way of finding out whether or not your family is the right kind of family to associate with. It's not a new thing, as those in Jesus' day also had to wrestle with the question of kinship and familial connection. A person's family of origin was the primary source for his or her status and location in the world as an essential reference point for their identity. If you were born the child of a farmer, most likely you grew up to be a farmer or you married one. If you were born the child of a priest, you most likely grew up to become a priest or marry one. All of this because of your accident of birth into that particular class of people. That accident, however, had long-standing implications on the trajectory of your life from that point. You could earn honor by doing great things, but they had to be really great things. And in well-ordered societies, it is belonging within proper ranking of one's hierarchy that is important. Your family, whether it was an actual biological connection or what is known as fictive or embraced kinship, defined your social standing in the community, especially within the higher echelons of society, where it defined not just social but political standing and therefore power. Now, the various social issues at play in Jesus' world, out of all of these things that we mentioned, honor, kinship, and patronage, none of them had more power than the idea of purity. The purity system was a system organized around the contrast or polarities of someone being pure or impure, clean or unclean. An example would be if I were to do something, untoward this morning. I'm not going to. That would be insulting to people here. There'd be a visceral reaction of disgust. There would be some of you going, ew. Yet in China and places in Asia, no one would think anything of it. It's just something people do when they need to do it. Purity is not just a matter, though, of physical cleanliness, but also there are moral implications, and therefore social cleanliness plays into this as well. Purity codes were a way of talking about what is proper for a certain place and time, however one society fills this content in. The opposite of purity is pollution, or the defilement of proper things as understood by society. A notable example is from the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10. It's a story of a man attacked, robbed, and left for dead on the side of the Jericho road on the way to Jerusalem. A priest and a Levite, both members of religious caste within Jewish society, passed by this man who is nearly dead, but they refused to help because helping might defile them as they came in contact with someone who was dying or dead. They are acting according to the purity laws of the Old Testament, laws which were common in the ancient world for those who served their particular gods. It was so important in society that you remain pure, especially in religious society, that the Jews have this enormous list of laws about what purity is or isn't. It meant the difference in being able to connect to or not connect to God. If you were impure, you could not come into the temple, could not offer sacrifices. If you were pure, you could. That simple designation defined how close to God you could be. Now, as we have seen, and as you can read in the Gospels, Jesus turns the Greco-Roman and Jewish world's systems upside down. He declared the dishonorable, the hopeless, and the humble to be inheritors of the earth and the kingdom of heaven, as he spoke in the Beatitudes. In doing so, Jesus made a statement about being honorable and what that is to truly be honorable, to live lives internally of simplicity before God, seeking not for yourself, but for others as you seek after God. He declared those who had no one to care for them to be cared for by God Himself in the Sermon on the Mount. This stands against the system of patronage by saying that even the lowest of the low, have a patron greater than all the ruling classes of the Roman Empire, greater than Caesar himself. He declared those who were fatherless and without family to be his brothers and sisters, children of God, as he wandered the countryside teaching and healing the people. This kinship, according to the writers of the Gospels, gives the family of Jesus the most powerful of familial ties, ties to divinity. And he declared those who had been unclean in the eyes of the religious establishment to be made clean in the eyes of the Creator, as he did with the woman caught as an adulteress, whose accusers in the end could not be found, as Jesus stood there and watched them one by one drop the very stones they were going to kill her with into the sand, as he pointed out to them that their own sins were no less grave than hers. This reframing of what is clean and unclean sets itself against the excessive purity expectations of a society obsessed with outward appearance, but giving little regard to the character of the person within. So why did Jesus come in the Jewish year 3758 rather than this day and age, as Judas of Superstar would ask? Because the time itself was pivotal and ripe for change. If you consider all of the things that we've just talked about with honor and kinship and purity and patronage, all of those things, how Jesus' ministry, how Jesus' life changed all of that, especially for the poorest of the poor. How they could be seen and see themselves as people of honor. How they could have kinship and family that was truly out of this world. How they could have a patron in God Himself to look over and watch after them. How they could be pure from within instead of from without. All of these things were major changes in the way the world looked at everything. What Jesus did was not just question, but He taught them how to ask the right questions, taught them how to see beyond the questions to the answers that mattered. Not only that, but the time was ripe because of the world that existed. The gospel traveled far and wide because of the Roman roads and the peace of Rome that existed at that time. Despite Rice and Weber's challenge to the contrary, the world of ancient Rome was the perfect place for the word of Jesus and His message to take off and reach the masses. Masses who found themselves among the poorest of the poor, not only in terms of their financial well-being, but the poorest of the poor in spirit. These masses hungered for change. Not just the Jews in Palestine, but the poverty-stricken peoples of all races in the Roman Empire. That hunger found its messenger in Jesus. One whose message said the world system is the wrong system. The world system is a system for the rich and the powerful. The God system, the true way of discipleship, opens the door for all to know life and know it abundantly. To know a world of plenty in the face of want. To know honor in the face of being downtrodden. To know kinship without family. To know purity in the filthiest of outward circumstances. It was and is true communion with God and neighbor. True connection to what is most compelling about life. And so, this child whose Hebrew name is Yeshua, was born in the Jewish year of 3758 because He needed to be. For the generation that existed then, and for all the generations that were to come. The time was right then. The time is right